Okay, welcome. We'll make a start, I think. Oh, hang on. Another one coming in. Come in, grab a seat. Good to go? Yeah? Great, thank you. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon. My name is Daniel Brown. Hi, come on, grab a seat. Daniel Brown. My pronouns are he and him, and I'm a hypnotherapist, counsellor and coach. I've been in private practice for about 15 years now, up in Warwickshire in the Midlands, if you're familiar with the geography of this country. My primary client base is LGBT plus clients. Hi, welcome, come grab a seat. Is LGBT plus clients, so lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans people, and then the plus encompassing all of the other different sexualities and gender identities. Now, today we're going to be focusing on working with trans clients, and hopefully that is what you are here for. While I talk through what we're going to cover today, I'm going to pass around the iPad. It's got a QR code on it, and if you want some slides and a glossary of terminology sent to you afterwards, scan the code, pop in your details, and then I'll email that over to you. You won't be spammed with anything else, you'll only get that, all right? So, in terms of what we're going to cover today, we're going to look a little bit at terminology and what gender identity actually is versus biological sex or sex assigned at birth. We're going to explore pronouns in a little bit of detail, and also some of the specific issues and challenges that trans people face and how that might present in your therapy room. Okay? Then I'm going to go through some what I feel are top tips. Hi, grab a seat. Top tips to help you in your practice if you were to work with trans clients, and hopefully there'll be some time for questions at the end as well. So you may have read the description of what this session is about. It was going to be a 1-hour session, but then I found out I only have 25 minutes. So I've had to take a lot of content out, but if you scan the code, you'll get a lot of stuff sent to you that I won't be able to cover in today's session, okay? But before I go into terminology and stuff, it would be good to hear from maybe one or two of you about what you're hoping to get from today's session and kind of where your knowledge base is at in terms of working with trans people. Anyone want to, before I pick someone out? Yeah, go for it.
For me, again, being a cis man and not necessarily understanding all the experience they have, is how can I make my practice a safe space where they can be feel secure, basically. And what kind of common mistakes to avoid, and how can I encourage them to be themselves.
Yeah, we'll certainly cover mistakes towards the end, and indeed how you can make your service accessible, welcoming to all types of people, not just trans people. Anyone else want to share where your knowledge is at, what you're hoping to get from today? From one more person, maybe. I'm going to come to you because you're looking at me.
Me?
Yeah.
I actually teach a couple of people who are trans, and I guess my curiosity in here is I haven't particularly noticed any difference in approach. Well, there hasn't been from my side any difference in approach. And I guess I just wondered whether there was anything I was missing out on, perhaps. So any extra information is input that I don't currently have.
Yeah, okay. I mean, you know, trans people, LGBT plus people experience anxiety, stress, depression, whatever it is, in pretty much the same way as everyone else does. I guess the difference is what's causing that, what's behind it. And it's not always related to their identity. You know, plenty of trans people will seek therapy for something completely unrelated to their identity. But it may arise, and I guess it's therefore good to be included on this kind of thing. But let's look at terminology first of all. That can be a bit of a minefield, and when I deliver these sessions, I often find that people really want to know what is and is not okay to say. What's the current terminology? I don't want to say anything that's going to offend someone. So I guess first of all, I'll explain the difference between gender identity and biological sex or sex assigned at birth. So sex assigned at birth is based on how the baby looks when it's born, you know. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So, you know, primarily based on the genitalia of that baby, and then it's assigned a boy or a girl. Whereas gender identity is very much in the mind. It's how someone feels that they actually are. And that may or may not match their biological sex or a sex assigned at birth. Welcome, grab a seat. So that's the difference between sex assigned at birth and gender identity. And then both of those differ to sexual orientation, which is about who someone is romantically or sexually attracted to. So within the trans sphere, there's lots of different identities. So you may have heard of gender fluid, for example. So that's when somebody's gender is literally fluid, it changes, it's not fixed. So somebody may feel that they're more male, sometimes more female another time, sometimes neither, both, any kind of combination. And that could depend on how the person feels on a particular day. It could depend on the situation. So for example, I know people who feel more male or masculine at work, more female, more feminine when with friends in a social situation. But it's not fixed, it's fluid. Non-binary is a term that you may have heard of, that's certainly becoming more widely known, more commonly used. And a non-binary person does not necessarily have a gender, so they're neither male or female. And then another term is transgender. So that's somebody whose gender identity doesn't match their biological sex. And a transgender person may or may not go through the process of transitioning. So that would be a diagnosis of gender dysphoria, hormones, counselling, possibly eventually surgery, surgical procedures. But not every transgender person goes through all of that. And then we have the word trans, which is an all-encompassing word for all of those different identities relating to gender identity not matching the biological sex in some way. Okay. So next I'm going to cover pronouns, and that's all about how you refer to somebody. So I mentioned that at the start my pronouns are he and him. I have it on my badge here, he, him, his, so everyone can see what my pronouns are. And that's how you would refer to me because I identify as a male. Somebody who's female may well have she and her pronouns, but somebody who is trans, non-binary, gender fluid may well have gender-neutral pronouns. So that could be they and them. Now another gender-neutral pronoun that's becoming more widely used and known about is it. And when I was younger, that was always a very offensive way to refer to someone, particularly if they are trans. But it is becoming more widely used, and you may well hear somebody saying that their pronoun is it. Now, in terms of your use of people's pronouns, I think it's okay to ask. If you're not sure, ask the person you're engaging with what their pronouns are, just to make sure that you are getting that correct. If you, for some reason, don't want to ask or forget to, but you're worried about getting it wrong, go with they, them, because that can apply to anybody actually, not just people who are trans. But it is okay to ask the question, and most people will actually appreciate you wanting to know and wanting to get it right. So that's a bit about pronouns. Now, in terms of specific issues and challenges that trans people might face, I wonder whether you have any ideas of what trans people are going through and what kind of things they may bring to the therapy room. Are there any views on that? While I have a drink. Yes?
Is there anything about uncertainty? Like uncertainty as to one's identification? Is that something you're going to do? And then people's reactions and
Yeah, absolutely. You know, some people spend a long time questioning their identity or get to a certain age and then start questioning. I've worked with people in their 70s who have lived, I can think of one person in particular, lived as male, identified as male, got to the age of 70 and decided, actually, I'm not sure I am a man. And now they are living as a woman. They're going through the process of transitioning, sadly divorced their wife, had to come out to their kids and all that. But yeah, they were very much questioning and needed therapeutic support just to kind of work things out in their mind a little bit. Now, you mentioned other people's reactions, and that's definitely another challenge that a lot of trans people experience. In an ideal world, I think people would need to come out because everyone is just accepted, you know, it's all good, right? But yeah, unfortunately, when a lot of trans people come out, they're met with a lack of acceptance from family, from friends, from society, and that can very much be present in the therapy room. Yeah. Any other views on?
I think
Yeah.
the toilets has been a massive issue, hasn't it? The whole which one do I go in? You know, I've got a mate who, she's female and she identifies as female, but her outward gender expression is very masculine. So she uses the ladies' toilets, but she gets people looking at her funny and questioning her on whether she should be in there and things. And our local theatre's got around it by just putting a unisex sign on one of their toilets. They've got the standard man, woman, and then they've just got a picture of a toilet when it says unisex. And I thought, do you know what, that covers everything.
Yeah.
Doesn't it? But I know there's been a lot of dispute and discussion and, you know, all that online.
Yeah, but there's a lot of debate that goes on around toilets, which toilets should trans people use. And, you know, if someone is female, that identifies female, then they should be able to use the female toilets. And at least in the UK, if you look at the Equality Act, then they're able to, you know, use the female toilets. There's a lot of fear-mongering in my experience. You know, all trans people are going to assault us in the toilet or whatever. In my experience, trans people just want to have a pee in peace, you know, like everybody else. So yeah, that's certainly an issue that comes up. Anyone else have a view? We'll come here.
Acceptance around their outwardly body, how they look. Issues around that.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, how their body is looking, particularly if their body is developing in a way that just is not them, that they know it's not right. And that can be really traumatizing for a lot of trans people. And I've worked with a number of young people who are trans, and their body has been developing in a way that they don't want it to, they want it to stop. And it's resulted in self-harming, really loathing themselves, wanting to hide themselves away, and all that kind of thing. Yeah, your hand up at the back.
Yeah, I was going to say about the possibility of leaving home maybe for the first couple of times when you're dressed in a non-conventional way for your body type, should we say, and all the issues surrounding that could then lead on to agoraphobia and those sorts of things, and it then deepens that anxiety to every time they think about leaving home. So I would imagine that's an issue at some point as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly for trans women, so those assigned male at birth, but they are female. And one recent client I've seen that sticks out was terrified of going out dressed in female clothing, you know, presenting as a woman, even though that's how they identified. You know, in their words, they weren't going to fool anyone. You know, they're very tall, very well built. One day they actually did turn up at my door dressed in female clothing, and I was so proud of them, because I knew what a big step and the months that had led up to that.
It's so much more. I know there's still a way to go, but there's so much more acceptance now than what there was. I used to run shoe shops from 1989 up to like nearly the year 2000, and the amount of men that used to come in dressed as a woman, whether that's because they were transitioning or whether that was because of another reason, but back then my staff used to snigger, they used to like talk about them behind the back rooms and all those sorts of things, and never fazed me at all, even despite what the press would have you believe about people of my age and gender and stuff. And it's just one of those things, they're people, and that's the end of it. It doesn't matter what you believe in, they're still people. Treat the person, give them the shoes, give them what they're after at that particular point in time. If you want to go home and talk about them after, well, that's on you. That's not on them. So give them the respect and the space they need at that particular point.
Yeah, that's the thing. You know, people don't have to accept it. They don't even have to understand it. But just common decency and respect is not a lot to ask for. You know, we can't police people's thoughts, but an action is a choice. Yeah, absolutely. So, what have I got on my list here? So transphobia, an obvious one perhaps. Transphobia seems to be growing worldwide. Certainly here in the UK, things have been going backwards to a real kind of shocking degree. and being very immersed in these communities, it feels like 20 years ago trans people were more accepted than they are today. So we're seeing hate crimes rising year on year in the UK. We're seeing people in positions of power and influence saying pretty horrific things in the media, on Twitter, wherever it may be. And I think that filters down into communities and emboldens or empowers people to act on prejudiced views that they perhaps always held. Discrimination is quite a common one as well off the back of transphobia, or at least it's rooted in transphobia perhaps. I have worked with somebody who was a trans man, and they went to get their hair cut at a men's barber's, and they were told, sorry, we don't cut lesbians' hair, which is kind of wrong on so many levels. You know, never mind that this person is actually a trans man. So there's still discrimination, being denied services, that kind of thing. Being disowned by family. Sadly, when a lot of trans people come out, their families don't accept it. They throw them out, they disown them, or they say, if you're going to continue living under my roof, you've got to get back in that closet, basically. And that causes all sorts of pain, you know, the whole rejection around that. Barriers to accessing health services. To transition in this country, you need to have a diagnosis, a medical diagnosis of gender dysphoria, and then you can undergo the treatments, you know, as part of transitioning. But the average waiting time in the UK for a first appointment at a gender clinic is around about 7 years currently. The NHS target is 18 weeks, but the average wait is 7 years. In some parts of the country, it's as long as 10 years, just for a first appointment. People can access private treatment, but obviously that costs a lot of money, and not everyone has that privilege to be able to afford those services. So if you have somebody who's trans, they feel essentially they're in the wrong body, they hate themselves because their body is developed in a way they don't want to, and then they're told, okay, you can have an appointment, you can go through this process, but you've got to wait 7 years for your first appointment. What are they supposed to do in the meantime? So I see a lot of people in my clinic who have been waiting years, and they're at a point of despair really, and need quite intense therapeutic support to deal with all of the emotions around that. All of that can lead to a lot of internalised shame, internalised guilt, internalised transphobia, and then maybe acting that out on other trans people. And I see a lot of self-harm. I think it's rare that I see a trans person who has not self-harmed or thought about ending their life. And sadly, as I said, things seem to be getting worse. So what can you do as a therapist to support trans people and to show that you welcome trans people, that you work in an affirmative way? Are there any initial thoughts in the room? Thank you. Initial thoughts on that in the room of what you could do in your practice? Or are you kind of hoping I'll tell you? Yeah.
Well, maybe just putting it clearly on your website, I suspect, just saying we are welcoming, inclusive, and whatever logos there might be as well, to kind of signal it.
Yeah, absolutely. Just making it very clear in your advertising, on your website, on your socials, in your leaflets, whatever you have, that you support, welcome, accept trans people. You could expand that to LGBT plus people in general, or you can even expand that further. You welcome people of all identities, you know, however you want to word it. Or you could put a trans flag somewhere on your advertising, for example. But in my experience, small things can make a massive difference. So wearing a pronoun badge, like I do on my lanyard, using your pronouns, you know, when I greet clients, every new client I say, hi, my name's Dan, my pronouns are he and him. Some people are like, what? You know, what are you on about? Because they're not part of that community. But those who are trans certainly appreciate it, I think. Something else you can do, email signatures. It's quite common now, pronouns on email signatures, on social media profiles. On your intake forms for your consultations, have it as a question. Ask your clients what their pronouns are. Again, some people wonder what on earth you're on about, but those who are trans will really appreciate you asking the question, and it will really make them feel that this is a safe space where they can be themselves and not edit who they are. Okay, so I've only got a couple of minutes left. A few minutes ago, the 5-minute sign went up. So I'm going to give you some key takeaways. So first of all, you do not need to be trans to work with trans clients. Yes, some people like to see themselves in their therapist, but actually this stuff is so important, and we need therapists who are not trans to be working in an affirmative way with these communities. Mistakes. Someone mentioned mistakes. If you make a mistake, own it. It happens. Even I make mistakes, use the wrong pronoun, sometimes the wrong name, but own the mistake. Don't try and wing it or pretend that it didn't happen. Own it, apologise, and just try to do better next time. Most people will appreciate you taking that approach rather than trying to wing it or ignore it. It's okay to ask questions, coming back to that. Most people will appreciate you asking. Don't be afraid to ask questions, all right? And then finally, get some further training. You know, something a bit longer today, a bit more in depth, to really boost your knowledge and perhaps more importantly, your confidence in working with trans clients. So, how long have I got? Couple of minutes, okay. Are there any questions before we wrap up? Anything I haven't covered that you'd really like to know about?
What would you suggest for talking about, for someone who's transitioned and changed their name, what would you suggest is the best way to talk about that person when you're talking about them before the transition? Because I've got a friend whose child has transitioned in their teens, and my friend's having a real issue with, well, how do I talk about him when he was her, and getting tangled up in it?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
It does. I would just use their chosen name. Use the name that they are now. Take away the he, the him, the pronouns. Just take that out of it and refer to them by name. It is probably the best approach. But I certainly wouldn't use the person's old name, their given name.
Because I'm aware that that's a faux pas, but I've actually counselled a parent whose child was transitioning, and she was delighted about the transition because the kid had been suicidal and all sorts, and this was clearly what was underlying all of it. But she was really struggling with giving up the birth name because she'd fought so hard to have the birth name, and she was like, I don't like it being called a dead name, I don't want it to be that, but I want to support my child. And it was one of those, I never thought about that as the sort of ripple effect on other people, that we focus on the trans person and they need support, but other people need support to deal with it and to try and do their best as well, don't they, sometimes?
Yeah, absolutely. It can be really tough on parents, and as in this case, it's not that they don't accept it or don't understand it. I think, as with a lot of parents, they've spent time picking out that name, probably mapped out or had ideas of what their child's life would be like.
It feels like a rejection. That's what I've had from people.
Yeah.
From my friend and from that client, it feels like my child has rejected that name that I carefully chose for them, and they have the right to do that, but I'm also I'm hurt by that, and that's valid,
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, and a lot of parents need time to kind of come to terms with that, and possibly therapeutic support themselves. So I'm going to be told it's time up, stop, I've got to stop. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. Sorry it was such a short session. I've got a table out there all weekend. Come along if you want to continue the discussion, but thank you.